Morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to your High Council messages. It is Sunday. What is it? Sunday, April the 26th today. So if you want to access this High Council reading live, the description is in the link below. The link is in the description below. If you want to be a member of the High Council, which means that your energy is directly involved in the transmission, then that link is in the description. Really what this is about, it's a council of let's call it the divine sovereign feminine, but there aren't really words for you cannot translate this into words that we have. But I'm just the translator of frequency, thought, messages, reality, truth, and I just translate it all through. This message. Okay. So just to give a bit of background to people that haven't seen these transmissions before, so what I'm tuning into is a kind of group entity. I've always worked with a group consciousness, better word than entity. This is this sort of, let's call it cleaner, smaller group of very powerful feminine energy. So it's, I want to say powerful, I mean kind of clean. It means it knows what it is. It's direct, it's clean, it's clear. So it's authentic. So when you're authentic, when we're authentic in alignment, we're powerful. So power is about what I would call cleanliness, clean, what I would call a clean signal. And so this is a very clean signal, very clean group consciousness signal. Yeah. Okay. Ready to go. Oh, what's going to happen today? Right. So, King of Swords. I mean, this is speaking of systems. This is a masculine energy, so it's speaking of systems, structures, communication. It's in alignment with what I was just speaking about. It's kind of backing it up, saying this is clear communication. This is a grounding. So this is sort of an interesting message about how it's a very clean feminine signal that speaks through a masculine entity. The reason why we can't translate feminine signals into masculine entity is because we can't translate feminine signals is because essentially language is a sort of masculine thing. It's why we can't really speak intuition, or we could say that feminine is more telepathic. It's more passive or more felt. It's less finite. Because it's more of a flow than a finite thing. And language is about finite pieces that we try to put into a flow, right? So it's basically saying that you cannot speak or translate feminine knowledge feminine knowledge accurately, because it has to be translated into the masculine and into masculine language, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just saying that it's not that it's always going to be slightly inauthentic, if that makes sense, if we're trying to be purely understand the signal. But that doesn't mean that it's incorrect or wrong, that it needs to be translated through the masculine action of translation into language in order for it to be communicated. This is what this message is speaking of. there's a personal message. So everything is on the macro and the micro. So the personal sort of micro message around that is for you to know that, for you to be in your essence, for the feminine to be in her essence. That's just, this is more like teaching about something more abstract. So it's not like teaching. This is more just teaching about how things are from a masculine and feminine perspective, than speaking to a either side of that coin. It's saying that the feminine requires the masculine to be translated. And some of the messaging, or a lot of the messaging that's been coming through in this space, has been a little bit around this idea, or circling around this idea, that the feminine requires the masculine, or he serves the feminine. He makes things real. He makes things, he has more power to articulate. He has more power to articulate. And this is just kind of biology. So in general, the lower we take our voice, the more powerful it seems. The slower and the lower it goes, the more powerful that is. In general, women or feminine people like me, my voice is very kind of cracky at the moment because I haven't been well. We have quite weaker voices because they're higher, they're less resonant, and that's just biology, right? So the female voice isn't as powerful as the male voice. And this is probably one of the reasons why the male biological body being in general has more sort of power when we are focused upon things like language, and let's call it science, what we have called science, or kind of the physical expression that we can see with five senses, rather than integrating the sixth sense, so to speak, the unseen or the quantum. The masculine has way more gravitas and power in that realm. The feminine has all the power in the other bits, which are way more, which have way more mass in reality. So in reality, and something that came through in the last 2 or 3 meetings, which I haven't been able to share on YouTube, but they were only shared with the people that were present, is that it was called, the feminine aspect was called plasma. And I am plasma. I am plasma, which is why I can speak from anything or translate anything, because and also potentially are in that speak for the feminine place. Then it's really not about feminine, it's about reality, and it's about mass. So the messaging that came through regarding that is that if the feminine is plasma, then she is 99.9% of reality. And the masculine, or the scene, or what we're using and we're calling reality, is really therefore 0.01% or thereabouts. So where is the real? So this is difficult to translate. I was going to say, where is the real power? In a world where we're focused on the 0.01% as everything, then if you speak that language of the 0.01%, and that's what we call reality, then all the power is in that. But when we begin to integrate and work and speak and live and sense into the 99.9%, then that feminine, so to speak, the unseen, the unquantified, that's where all the mass is, if that makes sense. So that's where the stuff is. So if it's a pie, the pie chart, 99.9% is feminine, and 0.1% is masculine. So the imbalance is actually way in the favor, so to speak, of the feminine, because that feminine energy is all that is. And this absolutely mirrors my experience before I first came on YouTube, where I had this experience where I was in darkness, but it wasn't evil. It wasn't any sort of, it wasn't darkness like we project fear into and onto, which is part of the problem. It's just, it wasn't even neutrality. It was pure negative space, but it was negative in its entirety. So it didn't feel bad or off because there was no distance. If you're keeping up, there's no distance between how things should be and how things are. That's what leads to negative emotion, negative experience. When your experience is in alignment with what is happening, when your consciousness is swimming in negativity, it doesn't feel like negativity. It feels essentially neutral. But for in that negative space, and if I'm to kind of quantify this, because it's going to seem strange, this was in a deep meditation, and when I was in, not deliberately, but just in, my consciousness was so expanded and expansive at the time that I was able to be everywhere. And so in that darkness, so to speak, there's creation. Creation is triggered by the negative. So the negative is constantly creating. That's just what it does, because it isn't all negative. So when one is in reality, one is aware that creation is most of what exists, and that I would call that the feminine energy. That is 99.9% of all that exists, and it creates, so to speak, the 0.01%. So in reality, what this is saying and what this is kind of reconfiguring for us is that sort of yin yang symbol is wrong. And the reality is that it's kind of like all dark. Think of it, does look like a vagina, right? It's a black hole, and then in the middle of that black hole is a point of light. And that point of light is created by the black hole. It cannot exist without it. Creation, the point of light, this spark of light, is created by I'm just distracted now because I've got another thing to share about it, but it's created by it. But because what came to my mind is this is the kind of ratio, and I wonder what the ratio actually is, of an egg to sperm. The sperm is much, much smaller than the egg, right? So it's that sort of thing. Like the most of what the mass is feminine, and the masculine is a tiny, tiny piece. But that tiny, tiny piece is kind of like necessary for reality, right? So it is kind of 50-50 in terms of what is required in the recipe. But in terms of mass, the feminine is much bigger, right? So when we get a hold of that, when we can know that, when you can allow that to be your reality and embodied, then you can really understand. I mean, it's just done. You get it. Like, you understand the way reality is now, right? Okay, now we can move on. Okay, but the kind of front face is this masculine sword. This is truth, reality, communication, language, all of that sort of stuff. Okay, and it is important. It's very important. It's a very, very important piece, because without that, nothing can really exist, right? But we can't live from that. It's kind of like the shell. It's a tool. It's not the impetus. It's not something to create from. It is something to create with, right? We create from reality, and reality is that it's just a piece. It's a tool, right? Okay. I'm doing my temple clock spread. I'll share this with you one day. I need to get my, one day I think it's actually more powerful if you don't see my face and you just see the cards. I think that's the most powerful way to do it. I just need to work out a way to organize that, to get my tripod back up and running and recording in a different way. Right, so we have King of Swords in the middle of this temple right now, and it's really speaking to the power of communication and the power of language. And I just want to say thank you very much for being here. And please do comment. Please do respond in the comments, because I know, I get, there's around 100 people that are kind of watching this, and I want to serve you, and I want to know what you think, and I want to know what you want, and I want to know your feedback so that I can um, to basically serve you better, right? So please comment at the end of this video. Please watch it all the way through and then comment at the end. Okay, so um, because, and also what I want to say, because this is such important information, and I just want to make sure it's delivered in the right way, and also that it gets to the right people. And the more I can know about you, the more I can know about how to get this out to more people, because I do think there are people that need this, and it's not getting to them. So I just want to know where you are and who you are, because it's such powerful. So I just think it's the most important information. Right. So we're kind of moving back now into the kind of now space. Okay, what's going on now? And what I call 12 o'clock, top of the temple north, is this eight of cups. And this is really this feeling that of not enough. That we're not being emotionally fulfilled, that we're not fulfilled emotionally. We're not, or our hearts are not full, and that there's something else, something more, somewhere else to go. And the message around this is that, and always around this eight of cups, is that it is an illusion that things are not whole and that things are not enough. But that doesn't mean that sense of something being missing isn't also important and valid. But the messaging is just to kind of to know both at the same time and be patient. It's also kind of a little bit speaking to this idea that any sort of journey you go on now, or healing, or anything you're trying to find right now, is going to be a bit pointless, but that doesn't mean you don't go. It's basically saying the journey is what's happening now, not the destination. The story that I always attribute this Eight of Cups to is the story of The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. Because in that story, the story is about a journey, but if we focus on, okay, the outcome, he's looking for his treasure, and then he finds that his treasure, physical treasure, is where it already where he is. It kind of, it's asking us what is the treasure? Is the treasure what you're seeking, or is the treasure the journey of the seeker, so to speak? Where is the treasure? Is the treasure in the experience, or is the treasure in the having of the thing that you're trying to get to, right? This is the essence of this eight. So it's not saying don't go. It's kind of, but don't go, don't seek, don't want, don't desire, don't feel lack, that there's lack. It's saying that that lack is an illusion that is driving a journey right now. And you have a choice. You can stay where you are and you can journey in your own self. For a year I didn't really go anywhere or do anything, but apart from journey through consciousness in the way that I've just somewhat shared with you. So it's kind of saying that the journey is it's a journey of consciousness, and you don't actually have to go anywhere or achieve anything, or try to go anywhere or achieve anything in order to take your consciousness on that journey. But it's really up to you. You can have those physical experiences, or you can have them psychologically. It doesn't really matter. And and then the next card kind of explains a bit further about how we do this, because we have this sun card comes up, I think 80-70% of the times I get the cards out, feels like every time. This sun is just such the most important message, which is you just have to do what lights you up, what feels like I'm me, I'm here. Again, it's about the child in you, the child that knew what it wanted and what felt good. My kids right now are really excited about this idea of going to Japan, and they are packing for Japan. They've been packing for Japan for 2 days. It's really about allowing ourselves to have desires and take action towards them without any attachment to what that means, just allowing the excitement to drive us. And for many of you, it is going to be about, okay, stripping away these sort of adult selves that are not really reflecting your joyful essence. And it can actually be a bit tricky because the messaging I have around this is like, for some though, even the child wasn't really allowed to desire in that way. So it's for some, it's just going to feel like, okay, I there won't really necessarily be a time where that was sort of allowed, because unfortunately the culture that we are in worldwide doesn't, I mean, maybe there's, you know, tiny communities that may be more open to this, but it's really just kind of like about working out how we live for survival. This is how our culture exists. This is how you behave. These are the rules, and these are the customs and the rules and the ways that we behave in order to survive. Because if you make yourself, as especially as a child, you make, or a baby, you don't fit in, then you're in danger because you're vulnerable. So we don't really, as a species, have much experience with joy, authentic joy. And so, but that is what the invitation is, to kind of, you know, come back to. And then the card after that is this seven of wands, which is a little bit sad. It's kind of like, I feel like it's saying that when we really get in contact with our authentic, let's say our light, right? Your light, the light that is within you, the light that is that 0.1%, that spark that is creation, that is literally what life is, and you are. It's kind of, other people don't like it. They get very triggered by creation, and this is not, this is a message about humanity and this patriarchy and all this kind of stuff, which was, and this fear of the feminine. It's really the fear of creation itself. It's really the fear of light. It's actually fear of feminine and masculine, you know, existing together, and what happens, like life itself, because it seems so unknown and unquantifiable, right? It has to integrate that feminine power. But it's not really about masculine or feminine. It's about our own power. It's about our own light. It's kind of pure energy. It's like electricity, you know. It's pure energy that is the essence of every single human, and that spark that created every single human. And when you get in contact with that power and that essence, for some reason, this is the thing that, as humanity on the micro and the macro, is the most afraid of, the thing of which we're most afraid. And it requires that you sort of have to be quite defensive about it. Like, once you achieve that, which is really just getting into contact with it, it doesn't look like anything other than you're in contact with it. And what I will say is, I have been in contact with this my whole life, and it has been very triggering for people, because it's like a kind of flashlight in the darkness. And to me, it's sort of a bit insane that anybody would have a problem with it, because to me, it's just normal, and it's life. It's just normal and natural. It's just, for me, it's very omnipresent. But for others, it just seems so, it's like, you know, people that have narcissistic personality disorder. And so if you ever, it's this envy, which comes from a false self. That's really what it is. The envy is comes from a focus on others all the time, a sort of outsourcing of reality and of self onto the environment, and what that means, or what that person thinks of you, or what that person is thinking, or the kind of games that sort of ego games or psyche games, these sort of false selves are sort of playing. And so it's almost as though, as humanity as a whole has become very consumed by its own vision of itself, and or its own narrative of itself, and then we get consumed by these narratives of ourselves. And when an authentic sort of God self shows up, because it's glorious, it's glorious. A newborn baby is absolutely glorious and spellbinding. We are born this way. We want to. I see it when I see it brings tears to my eyes when I see the way that kids are born and they're just ripped away. It's so insane what we do to. As soon as we're born, we get sort of like, we're born into fear-based reality. It's like if a baby doesn't cry when it's born, then it's not like alive, which is completely insane, because babies do not need to cry. But it's one of the things in this country, and I think around the world, it's like, okay, there's these tick boxes of practitioners of what babies need to do. If a baby doesn't cry, then it's like there's something wrong. And that is so, if you see it, this is a fear-based reality that we're born into. We are ticking boxes against death or illness before we're revering and allowing ourselves to be spellbound by the miracle of birth and of a birth, and allowing that human in general, I'm saying this happens in general, allowing that reality of the miracle of a human birth to just exist for, because we're in this fear-based sort of system. And so when we dare to get into contact with that essence of who we are, that light, that spark that we are made from and are and consistently are proof of, it's always happening, right? When we get in contact with that, it's kind of, oh no, like don't do that, like shut up, don't be real, don't be a miracle, don't be something that can't be controlled and understood, and it's just kind of a bit of a heads up, like, yeah, you have to defend it, you have to be defensive. And even though this is honestly completely insane to me personally, it's just the way that it is. Does it frustrate the hell out of me? Yes, it does. I think it's horrendous that this is what we do, that we get so terrified and just want to silence people. And I want to be really clear here, because there are a lot of people that think they're being authentic and they're not being authentic. Like they think they've had some sort of awakening. This has got nothing to do with ideology or ways of being or anything you do. It's about just being, allowing that light, that spark to be. It has nothing to do with the role that you're playing, the game that you're playing, the narrative of your life. Zero. So there are plenty of people that think they're being authentic because they're not doing what everybody else is doing. That isn't authenticity. That isn't living by your spark. So I just want to make sure that it's not being misconstrued here. That it's really just presence. It's really just it's much more of a process of allowing. And it is, in that regard, a feminine sort of thing, as in it's passive. It doesn't require action. It's just obvious. Your essence is allowed to be the first thing about you. The miracle of you, just of your existence, is allowed to be the first thing about you. And for some reason, we find this incredibly challenging, unless it's shrouded in a palatable story. I remember there's a guy, and I remember his first name is called Matthew. I'm not sure if I guess he's still alive. I think he might have been French. A monk. He's called like the happiest guy in the world or something. And I remember just thinking, yeah, he is present and he is completely authentic, but he has this sort of like it's like we want humans, if we're going to allow them to be teachers, so to speak, of this, we want them to be sort of like blissful and happy all the time. And as though happiness is, I mean, happiness is a kind of consequence of that when it is abiding, but it's not, we're not all supposed to be happy all the time. So so for that guy, that's his authentic self, that's his character in the play. We all have different characters, we all have different roles to play. All the world's a stage. um and it is, we're not supposed to look a certain way and behave in the same way. So just remember that. Then we come on to a couple of major arcanas after that, strength and the hermit. So it's really kind of telling this story that you have to be really strong and you have to be kind of hermited. It's like you have to kind of keep going, keep balanced, stay the time. But there's some sort of like loneliness involved. And there's potentially a bit of retrospective about this. I said, this is about now. I think it is about now, but I think there's a retrospective um, aspect to it, of just kind of understanding, putting everything together before we can move on to a new sort of plan, actually. Because it's kind of speaking of this awful sort of back and forthness. Yeah, I'm strong, and then I'm basically alone, and then like the Knight of Wands come out, like, oh, I found some passion, I found something authentic, I found something that really gets me going, I found someone or something that feels real and feels powerful and feels fiery and feels active and feels good and feels like it lights me up and I want to go. And then it's like, oh, but then I can't really do this. I end up carrying all this weight, and it's kind of sad. It's a kind of sad, rubbish story, and I get it. Kind of like story of, not that I've ever sort of victimized myself, but it is kind of, it's frustrating to feel. Well, honestly, I haven't really felt like, I don't feel a chronology like this, but I do feel resistance. I do feel like completely, like everything I say just does not impact that I live in a completely different reality. I live in a completely different universe. I live in a different dimension, and when I speak, it doesn't land. That I'm an avatar and a projection and a mirror that is just constantly projected onto, and I do not exist. That's more my experience, but I think prior to that experience, it was more that I did feel that every time I had some sort of knowledge or awareness of something that was powerful and good, or felt right and felt true and felt like part of who I was, that the world would just kind of make it very difficult and impossible for me to experience that. And I think a lot of these relationships, twin flame sort of stuff, really really does embody that, and be that, exist as that sort of story. And then what comes after that 10, though, and the last card in this sort of circle, temple circle clock spread, is this Page of Wands. And this does symbolize a sort of new page turn, a new idea, a new it it actually feels like a new book. It's not like a page turn or a new chapter. It feels like a new book, a new, like nothing changes, but somehow everything has changed. What is good about this is a lot of this tower energy is gone. And there was a lot of tower, there was a lot of swordy, there was a lot of stuff that was quite challenging. And I actually feel like that challenge is probably most likely feels like it's kind of gone. But we're sort of left with the ashes of our dreams. Um, but they were never really the right dreams. We left with the sort of ashes of a world that was never going to give us what we wanted. And I feel like that's the transition now. And if you're holding on to things, it's going to feel quite heavy. If you feel like you're kind of more in this hermit stage, it's probably just going to feel like you can't really build anything because everything is sort of like not solid. If you can't, we're not rebuilding in on the same land, right? It's this is kind of what it feels like. It's like you were never meant. It's like moving country. It's like the city is gone, and it's really gone. Like I can see that the visual that I have is literally ashes, like ashes, and this, and worse than that, as in the foundations. You can't build there anymore. Like it's almost like it's like a whole city, but whatever it was built upon, like it was like it had these foundations, and without those foundations, you can't build anything on it. And the foundations were made of wood, and they've burned too. So it's like there's no way. Like that land is done. Like that land is unoccupiable, which is good because it's like, oh, here we go. It's pushing us. It's pushing you to the new land, but there is a grief involved, or not even a grief, more of a kind of annoyance potentially of that didn't work, or if you kind of hang around, if you try to build on that, you're going to be like, this is not working, right? It's not going to work. And I think there's a bit of a transition right now, and I think there's a little bit of a suspension, and I would just wait until and walk. I do think it is a time to walk, a time to just go on a bit of an adventure and see if you can find something else. And this doesn't need to be physical. It can and could be physical. It could be, okay, you need to get out of where you are and go somewhere else. You want to think much more extensively about how and where and who you can live with. Uh but for most, it's much more psychological. It's much more, okay, everything that I thought was right, or I thought seemed like it made sense, I got to kind of let all that go and really start from scratch. And it's really about, it's much more mentally starting from scratch is what's happening right now. Let's get one more for a bit of clarity on that. Oh, the chariot, and so this is speaking of partnerships. It's really speaking of partnerships. There's been something really interesting going on, especially for people that are in this, vibe, in this space, able to translate this frequency, where anything that is not working is really getting destroyed. And like I said, if you are quite isolated in your life, spiritually, right? So, or as in, you know that this sort of, what I'm saying here is true, useful, kind of like has some sort of, let's call it wisdom. I would call it, there's some sort of universal wisdom that you're orienting yourself by, right? Which is the same sort of channeled from the same source, right? And if you are alone in that, alone, and then actually that's sort of, and if you're kind of physically isolated from people and from kind of a reality as you might know it, you're actually in the best position for this, because you don't really, you're already sort of floating above this city that's kind of now gone to ashes. So there isn't really anything that you're relying upon in that, right? So it's going to be easier. Like I said, it's just going to feel like you can't really put anything down when you can't really grasp anything, and everything's sort of like wishy-washy, and nothing's really real, and nothing is really going to be solid. That's how it's going to feel. If you have anything sort of left, I mean, there's a lot of people that are just completely miss this completely, because they're just often, sorry, but BS land, where they're just in their own projection. They're not going to make it. They're not in reality. So they're not in any sort of dimension that is that is integrated this reality as I've expressed, the 99.9% and the 0.1%, and really in this sort of, they don't have any access to magic or miracles, or like I would call it reality, like the miracle of your life, like your power, the power of you, the power of every human. Which is sometimes even harder to access, but that magic, that they don't even have access to that because they're so hyper focused and constantly and consistently focused in a complete mirage, that, or Maya, as it used, it can be called in Eastern philosophies. They're so trapped in that this is just complete nonsense, right? Or they're just not, they're not open, they can't hear it. That they're just going to carry on, and I mean, they'll have the same experiences because reality gets to everybody, but it's just, they're just going to attribute it to different things, and they're going to try and fix it in different ways, right? So things will happen, and they'll try and get a new job or buy a house, or they'll try to do something solid and it won't work and they won't know why. The same things will happen, but they won't understand that, they'll attribute it to some other narrative. So there's those types of people, and then there's people that really, I say, like, live a reality. If you are connected to other people, so if you have children, if you have a job that is, where you're kind of forced to, or a system, you're part of a system, part of what humanity is sort of built, the systems that you built around us. You're just going to feel probably a little bit detached and a little bit confused, and it may feel like impossible for you to actually engage with those systems. So if you have a job where you have to engage in some sort of system, that might suddenly feel impossible, where you've been able to sort of like, be present in it and play your role and do your thing, that it may be that is just not possible anymore. Relationships won't be possible anymore. Friendships just won't be possible anymore. They're just not going to be any cracks in people's authenticity. And what I'm really noticing is a lot of self-obsession and lack of connection. Just be aware. Just look out for that. Because you want to take this opportunity to really get rid of anything that isn't working on your behalf, because what really wants to happen is this chariot, which is about partnership and a higher way of living. The chariot is a holy vehicle, is that our lives together are a holy vehicle. And even when I say those words, it sounds really like, sort of like fanatical, like, oh, we've got to reach, these people that kind of are in these cults, and they want to, like, they're trying to get to some higher sort of plane together. It's gotten this sort of like crazy, psychotic sort of ring to it, right? But it is nevertheless an invitation to a much cleaner way of existing, that we are so much more in that miracle of ourselves and allowing each other, rather than being frightened by the essence and our light, that light that is born from the darkness, that spark of creation that is just ever present in this moment. Instead of being frightened by that spark, that we are able to communicate in and from that spark of creation, and then know what it is actually like to be in partnership, to actually have a communication and be in partnership in creation itself, not a narrative self and a narrative self engaging in some sort of narrative. Just the spark of creation present in me, present in you, and we allow that spark to be what connects us, not ideas, not narratives, not looks, not anything. That we embrace every single aspect of each other, but what we are speaking from and what we are communicating from and existing from is that spark. That's what this is. That's the much healthier, more accurate way to explain what it is to live in heaven on earth. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll be back with another message from the High Council next week. Like I said, if you want to come on live and hear this live, there's a group. I'm doing it yearly, and with a High Council that it's limited. The spaces are limited. But it may be that you want to. I think there is something powerful about being here when this is being in the space where this is communicated, and there is a barrier to entry. And it is a service space, it is a service space. But if it's you and it feels like it might be you, please get on it. You don't have to come every week. It's every Sunday. You don't have to be there. But I think there's something powerful about having your consciousness in this space whilst I'm it, rather than watching the recording. I'm just trying to translate it and, as usual, do what I'm told, hit my marks and say my lines. Okay. All right then. Lots of love. Namaste. Namaskar.